download, and it will help you track and keep up with us from wherever you are. And so we are growing, and we can only grow if you come and grow with us. Dr. Thompson, thank you for being with us, and good evening again.
Well, Dr. Warren, it is a pleasure to be with you again. So much is going on, and as you know, we are preparing for a lot of things, and we're excited about this season that we're in. But we're also very cautious about the things that are taking place throughout our nation. It is a time truly for us to be in prayer mode. It is a time for us to really trust God and know that He is yet sovereign and that He's in control. And it's a time for us to not do frivolous traveling, because I had to fill up today, and I saw at the pump $6.95, and it shocked me so much I went into prayer mode. Lord Jesus, guide me to another gas station where I can fill up my car. And he said go north. So I went to another gas station and found it for 570, 578, and I said, "There's still a God."
Yeah, yeah. If you ask, it says, "Ask it, and it shall be given."
Yeah,
And the
seeking you
gas
shall find.
prices. The thing that disturbs me about the gas scenario is the media keeps reporting a medium gas price of 4.25, and not mentioning the fact that we are $3 ahead of that out here. In L.A., gas is now 7.50 and climbing. I believe it's going to get to about $10 a gallon before it levels off. All of this is not driven by the war. A lot of it in California is about a changeover to the summer blend. And then we are looking at options that are available, because the federal government gets $1.18 in a federal tax on every gallon of gas. California gets 51 cents. Now, that's $1.70 right there. California has a surplus, so the governor is talking about doing rebate checks, I guess, to registered car owners here. Members of Congress are calling for a suspension of the excise tax, but we know that that tax is used to do highway repairs, and this is the same Congress that will not pass the big Build Back Better legislation that has money to address some of these very issues that they're depending on the taxes for. So we're in kind of a quandary here between people wanting to pretend that they're concerned about what needs to be done and the extent to which American people are suffering because things are not being done.
Well, one of the things that I want to say, and I want to continue to say, is that we have to realize that this is nothing new. There has been, every time there's a war, every time that there's a crisis, I don't know if you remember where they said that we had a massive gas shortage, and there were lines all the way down the street,
It was back during the Carter administration.
yeah, and what they come to find out is that it was really not a shortage. Instead of storing it at the gas station, every time people went down a quarter tank, they would go and fill up again, and so really the gas was being stored in the cars versus in the gas
That's
stations.
the same thing they did with the toilet paper during the pandemic.
Hmm.
And people panic and overreact, and they want to be able to travel. And then they look at the things that are happening. Um, it's good to keep your car full if you possibly can.
Hmm.
I mean, you look, we overnight we've had tornadoes sweep through, wipe out whole
Hmm.
communities. That means no power. There might be a gas station, but if there's no power, you can't get gas. You can't get the ATM.
Hmm.
So if you don't have money or you don't have heat, and the pontiffs are telling people that everybody should have like a minimum of about $5,000 that they can put their hands on. Well, that's not realistic in
Hmm.
terms of folks living in this economy, in this environment, because people are still living day to day, hand to hand, if they're able to live in a shelter at all. We're going to talk later this evening about some of the attacks that are happening right here in San Diego and in California, where we see more housing going up and more people going on the streets.
Yeah, and one of the things about it is there's a tremendous amount of housing going up, but the key word is affordable housing. And I'm not really seeing that. I'm seeing buildings left and right being built, restored, refurbished, and everything else. But what I'm not seeing is I'm not seeing that they're affordable housing. And I think that they should start, saying, look, when you build, 25% has to be affordable, no matter where it is in the communities.
Well, they tried something like that here back in the late 80s and the early 90s.
Hmm.
The government was giving subsidies to people who were engaging in building units that could be used for Section 8. And so some of that worked. But, we have moved from a people with a moral compass in terms of being concerned about others as we did in the 60s and the 70s, say. We have graduated now to the point where it's all about me, myself, and I.
Hmm.
It's about self, and there's very little concern about the other person on a large scale. Where I do find hope and encouragement is when I look at the people who are manning the food distribution centers, the volunteers that are still working
Hmm.
and who are there, week after week to make sure that folks get whatever is available. Then I'm encouraged in terms of seeing that because the irony is that those people are far too few in terms of the overall issues we're facing.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that we need to realize is that we're still yet one community. And a lot of times, in the me, myself, and I generation, we don't realize that if there's a part of our segment or our society that is not doing well, eventually it affects you also. I tell people all the time that, you might have a beautiful home. But then, if you're close to a canyon or whatever, you also have to now have homeless encampment shelters and things of that nature. People that are coming using your water hose when you're not home and doing different things. That is an outcome of the society not taking care of the least among us.
Well, but we can't blame it all on society because, we have more mental health issues now than we ever had. And I would say more. I remember back during the Reagan administration, there was this massive move to move people out of sheltered environments where we were handling mental illness, and a lot of these people were put on the streets
Hmm.
and given a check. And so we have people even here in San Diego that are on the street that do not want to accept housing. They don't want to come in, and that's why the mayor is talking about the possibility of creating mandatory conservatorships,
Hmm.
so that those who reject it, and the state's now talking about creating a separate conservatorship court, pretty much like a traffic court, if you will, that will hear these cases separate and apart from the normal conservatorships. Now, the concept of conservatorship is that a person has reached a point where they can no longer provide for themselves, and they need someone to supervise and to help them
Hmm.
and to watch out for them. And
Hmm.
so that gets to be very real. When I first came to California years ago, and I worked as a law clerk for county council, I one of the things I did was provide support to the attorneys that were doing these conservatorships.
Hmm.
And I was amazed. Most of us only think of a conservatorship in terms of what happened to Britney Spears.
Hmm.
But there are other people who've gotten caught up in that scenario. And so the idea is the mayor is talking about is that a conservatorship will force people off the streets, will force people to make a decision, and they will no longer just be free to do what they want.
Hmm.
I'm very concerned because as I drive now, the homeless encampments are expanding, uh, Brother Thompson.
Hmm.
I mean, downtown they're expanding almost exponentially. I'm looking at, like, wow, the old library.
Hmm.
It used to be just in that block. There's
Hmm.
the block before you get there. Rosecrans, El Cajon, all of these places, there are more and more people gravitating, and there are more elderly people out there. We're having more deaths out there on the streets in terms of what's happening.
Hmm.
And even though we send people out to do counts, I look at some of the things that we do, like, yeah, we put a couple of restrooms in key locations, but
Hmm.
a lot of these encampment areas, especially downtown, they don't have those porta potties for blocks,
Hmm.
which means that people are not going to walk to the porta potties. They're going to urinate and everything right where they are.
Hmm.
The trash is there, and it's a tremendous crisis that we have in terms of humankind.
Yeah, and I was on a call, and the question that I had in the call is that how we have protections around the schools, or you can't have cannabis shops or certain liquor stores around the schools within certain proximity. How can we then affect the children that are traumatized every single day going through those homeless encampments? We have kids walking in the middle of the street because they don't want to be grabbed or harassed. They're coming on filthy streets, so they're walking through. And we literally had to challenge the city with the old administration and say, while you're cleaning downtown streets for the Wall Street bankers, you need to clean these streets for the kids that have to come to the school that's downtown. And
Well, what's happening downtown is our streets downtown are looking more and more like the homeless areas of L.A.
yeah,
More and more like that. Downtown L.A. near the Garment District, that whole zone. And even though they're renovating and they're putting in housing and people are moving back in there and walking as they will, we still have issues. So this is a
yeah.
problem.
And I think that is a problem that is solvable, but it's going to take us to really have a plan of action. And it can't just be the city. I believe that it has to be the entire community, from the churches to the organizations to even the school districts, because, again, we literally have children living in those shelters. And I actually have some parents that choose to live on the street than in the shelters because of the outbreak of the COVID-19. They said they feel like they're safer on the street and away from people than in those confines that they're in now.
Well, that's not new. I'm trying to think of what it was called, but we had situation years ago that there would be outbreaks of deadly disease when you put people together and they're breathing, and I'm trying to remember what it was called, because I lost a classmate to this, and the military addressed it by putting people head to toe in barracks in terms of windows open and everything, trying to increase ventilation. So we have some real serious issues. I just want to remind people that you may reach us at 858-251-6111 if you want to call in. 858-251-6111. I noticed, Dr. Thompson, we keep having a number of people requesting that we bring them on camera.
No, that's just a feed for Facebook.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Because I was wondering if what we were experiencing.
yeah.
But you do have an opportunity to call in if you have a particular issue, concern. We do open mics so we can hear from you. And we like to do that because, again, our motto at the Voice and Viewpoint is people without a voice cannot be heard. And so we want to hear from you, and we're concerned, in terms of your thoughts. While you're thinking about that, a couple of things have happened of interest. In the past couple of days, the acting interim superintendent has become superintendent, and I think he's got a nice little contract with it, Dr. Thompson.
Oh, most definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Most
And
definitely.
So we're going to be talking with him both here in this program and at Black Men and Women United. And we've had him on this program before when we did the town hall meeting about the mental health for the kids with the doctors and the county superintendent and all those other people that we had involved.
Yeah.
And so that's a good segue, because when we're speaking of town halls, we're going to have a town hall tomorrow that's going to deal with hate crimes in our community as they impact African Americans. And the district attorney is going to be here in studio with us for this particular meeting. I have to point out something, and I had to do this several years ago. When you use a term, other people start using it, and they don't really know what it means. And it was the Voice in Viewpoint that brought the concept of town halls to our community. And a town hall meeting is different from a conference or just a get-together meeting. A town hall meeting is a meeting where the people of the town come, if you follow the concept, and they are able to ask questions and dialogue with whoever the people are that are the instruments or the targets of the discussion in the town hall. Town hall meetings do not occur when you invite people to be talked at. rather than to talk with. And so this is a concern that we have. Now, I'm hoping that, and we do the question and answer period, we cross that gap so that people can be heard and expressed. At the same time, though, Dr. Thompson can share with you, we're having problems with people hacking meetings and putting all kinds of obscenities and things on, and it's forced to a large degree that you have to lock folks out. But tomorrow we're going to have this town hall to talk about hate crimes, and I'm gonna help the DA because there's a lot of information that has to be shared, and the hate crime issue has come up even bigger now that we've had the AAPI attacks, and we need to remind people it didn't just start there, that we've been living with this, many of us, for a very long time. We've been victims of it for a very long time. In the time that I've been in California in the past 30 some years, there are several lynchings that I've covered here. They weren't in San Diego, but there have been lynchings in this state. And so we don't want people to think that we're just trying to bring you to pass.
Well, you know what? I want to go back to homeless because we do have a comment up here that says, thank you for addressing the homeless situation. I don't mean to sound callous, but I don't think there is a solution. Sadly, the last things they want is to be preached to. That's why they refuse to enter shelters. They don't want rules and regulations. Sad dilemma. And, in some cases, they do see that. Is that some people would rather be free and do their thing and not have any rules and regulations, but some just don't know.
Well, I would say to the caller, unfortunately, the good stories don't get the kind of attention that they should. I believe in Washington State, in Oakland, there are a number of places where the attack on homelessness has been extremely successful in terms of getting people off the streets, where encampments existed. In some instances, they've even built housing, and money has been made available. So we might be behind here, which we are in San Diego, because San Diego is even behind L.A., even though L.A. has a bigger homeless problem. I mean, 3 years ago, as clergy, I was attending meetings in L.A. Skid Row with their regional homeless council that had the involvement of clergy from all of the denominations there, working very closely and having a tremendous impact. And a matter of fact, I brought many of those ideas back here and shared them with the former mayor, because San Diego is a charter city. San Diego County is a charter county, and so that means that our city, unlike say El Cajon or Lemon Grove, our city is sovereign, and the county can't make the city of San Diego do anything, and the city of San Diego can't make the county. So they have entered into a working agreement, and most units have them. Most of our working agreements in San Diego County can be found in SANDAG, the San Diego Regional Area Association of Governments. And this concept of this kind of entity it was very much an outgrowth of Los Angeles that years ago growing, so that you kept having the overlay of communities, and with a street stop on one side and is on another because the cities were growing and there was annexation taking place. And so all of this there's a lot involved, and we have to look at it beyond what's convenient. We are trying, for instance, in southeastern San Diego to deal with something. Yeah, there's housing going up, but most of the housing that's coming out of the ground, and people don't know this, most of those units are already destined to be occupied before they even finish building them.
Yeah.
Because they've started the list early and they're not circulating the list. And we have a waiting plan here, but places like LA have up to 5 and a 10-year waiting plan for housing.
Yeah. Yeah, and so those are the things that we have to be mindful. I want to go back to, the appointment of the new superintendent. Again, Dr. Lamont Jackson is African American. We had Bertha Pendleton, I believe, was the first African American superintendent.
She was Dr. Pendleton, and she was in the system for 40 years before she became superintendent.
Yeah, and then followed by with Carl Cohn. and now he will be number 3. The one thing that I will say is that what I'm looking forward to is that to see the maturity and the leadership of this new superintendent. So many times we have seen, including with our current District E trustee, when you might not support their candidacy or their position, they seem to hold grudges and they can't allow the better good of the district to be served because they're in grudge mode. I'm hoping that Dr. Lamont Jackson will come out of this with leadership, and again, he will have that grace period to get things together, but he will be held responsible and accountable for making good decisions for children, especially children of colors, especially African American. And that's what I'm going to look at this superintendent. Will he do the courageous leadership that he's talked about for so many years and truly do what's right for schools north or south of 8 and especially for African American children? That is going to be the testament if he's going to be able to take that stance, or will he be mediocre and will he be passive aggressive and say that he has to serve the whole entire district and not really fight for the kids that have always been marginalized in our district? So that's what we're going to do, and that is going to be the accountability that I'm going to look for this superintendent. But I'm going to give him the opportunity to say that he can do it.
Well, we want to give him the opportunity, but I'm going to say some things. I don't really hold back on stuff. You mentioned Cohen. I think he was a disaster and a mistake, and he didn't do anything here. I think Bertha Pendleton did as much as she could, because even though she had the experience as an educator, 40 years in the system, the board wasn't as helpful as it could have been for her.
Yeah.
And fortunately, when she retired, she moved to Vegas, and why not? She had earned a shot at the good life, so I'm glad that she made it. One of the concerns that I have, and everybody is not in love with the superintendent, but the superintendent selection reminded me of Churchill when he talked about democracy. He said that democracy is a poor form of government, but all the others are so much worse. The alternative to Mr. Jackson was not an alternative. I think that was a disaster. I mean, the only thing that we didn't do there is put on a Girl Scout uniform and sit up a cookie table and say, "Show me around."
Yeah.
So we needed someone who been here and knew here and had all of that. But at the same time, I hope he doesn't suffer from an ailment that we often see. And as much as I love that he was our first African American president, it's been my experience over the past 60 years many times that when black people, and males in particular, get into positions of power and they're trying to satisfy the white element that's involved with their leadership, they often shortchange their own community, like feeling a sense of guilt, or they're going to be accused of doing too much for their own. And we seem to be the only ones that feel that way. The Irish don't have that problem. No other groups. The Mexicans don't have that problem. No other group is afraid to help themselves. And we don't think that people have to help themselves at the expense of others. But the help that we give ourselves has to be as equal and as inclusive as what we give to other people. Okay? And so this, we know, as one of callers raising a concern, because this is a inside appointment. We know it is, but at the same time, it looks like it was the best deal that we could get at the time, and we're going to have to deal with it in terms of it. We're going to hold him accountable. We're going to try to help him and not crucify him.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, Dr. Thompson, is helping us is that the whole concept of school board elections has been changed. And so we don't have to worry about being stuck with the same trustee again, because I don't think they could ever get elected from the community of District E on their own if they didn't have the rest of that at-large vote to pull them over the hump in a general election.
Yeah, and here's where I stand, Dr. Warren, is simply this. Everybody, when you get into position, you have an opportunity to prove us either right or wrong. And we're going to do everything and be available to support the new superintendent as much as we can to see him be successful, not just for him, but for our children. But again, I think it's so important that the leaders of the community step up and say, but we're going to expect accountability. We do not want passive aggressive behavior. And he has to look at how top heavy the district is and take some of those people out of the central office and put them to work somewhere else because we're too top heavy. There's just a lot that he has to do, but he has to have time. So I'm going to give him time, but I also need to let him know that our past superintendent stopped meeting with all the cultural groups and decided that she was going to design her own. She abolished race, human relations, and advocacy and came up with this thing called FACE that failed miserably after $5 million, and she couldn't. So we don't want all the things. Bring the things back that work, and and I'm gonna say at this say, man up and do the right thing by the students in the district and the people that work for the district.
Well, I really have tried to stay away from education for a number of reasons. First of all, because of all the years that I spent working for the committee that wrote the education legislation, then for the decade that I spent as an elected school board member and as a member of the board of directors of the National School Boards Association. And one of the things here is, and the public, I got to say this, communities have a tendency not to get involved in their schools until the schools are in dire crisis. And that's unfortunate. We still have a lot of parents here who are young parents. We have a lot of grandparents who have been forced by circumstances affecting their children to end up taking their children, their grandchildren, and raising them and having, at the time that they should be in the best years of their life, having to re-enter this whole process. We have a school district here, though, it's the second largest in the state. 65 languages, I think, spoken, and all kinds of issues. Unlike some other places in the country, I remember how schools worked before unions took over schools, before the American Federation of Teachers and all of that came along. Teachers would stay after school and spend time with students. And then when the union came in, they set the clock on what time you had to be out of the building and lockdown, and the community schools concept went away. 40 years ago, the Mott Foundation had this community school project that opened up our schools in the evening after schools to invite the community in and had activities that parents got into. So there's nothing new under the sun. All of the stuff has been done. The problem is that people either don't remember or haven't gone back to look at what's been done. Research has shown that there's about a 6-year period between when an idea is presented in terms of school administration, buried, and when it's resurrected again as stuff gets recycled, just like we did regional superintendents. And so we need to, as parents, we need to be as equally in community, as equally concerned as we are about the demands that we want to put on a new superintendent.
Yeah. And I agree. And that's why I say we do have to give him time, to be able to enact the vision and also to create his leadership that can take it to the next level. Again, I always say this, that we want to make sure that we don't have expectations on him that we've never had on anybody else, but we do expect that he will be that leader that we need in this season. And so we're going to give him a shot. It says, thank you, Dr. G, for district elections. What we need next is to reunite the district, combining back the high school districts and the community college districts so that the high schools and the trade schools progression is seamless. The elementary school districts should be made into neighborhood district schools, maybe 3 smaller neighborhood-based elementary districts.
Well, the problem with that, my dear friend, is, and I don't think people are paying attention, just like we held the community forum for the superintendents at the Wilson Middle School, which is a brand new facility on El Cajon Boulevard. Um, Logan Heights, we got all of these brand new school facilities, just like Lincoln is new. And the problem is that at the time we started planning those facilities, we were overcrowded. In every city you go into, it's about a 5 to a 10-year period between when you're planning the schools and when the school finally comes online. And in most instances, by the time the school comes online, the population is gone because birth rates are down and they've moved on. And so we also, my dear friend, have charter schools that are a big issue right now because they still have been, because people are trying very hard to get out of the public schools because they feel that they're disastrous. Many surveys show that the public schools right now are in worse shape than they were prior to the 54 Supreme Court decision, not based on race, but just because on the segregation of economics that's taken place in terms of communities, in terms of what people earn, where they can afford to live, where they have to move. I mean, most people cannot afford to buy a house in San Diego anymore.
Yeah.
$600,000, $700,000, $800,000 for a home, and they show that the cost of living here is like 40% higher than a number of other places in the country when you look at the 10 top places. And so these are real issues, and we want to address them in a constructive manner and not just come online pointing fingers and trying to make a war.
Yeah, and so with that being said, we're going to watch what's happening not only in the city school system, but schools in general. But also, we got midterm elections coming up.
Yes.
And go ahead.
Yeah, well, we do, and this is going to be an issue too. Not only midterm, but we have a special election coming up next month for the 80th Assembly District, where efforts will be underway to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Assembly Member Lorena Gonzalez to take a position in labor. And so we have two former city council members vying for that position, David Alvarez and Georgette Gomez, who is a former council president. And that whole campaign is getting muddied right now because it seems like a lot of development money is coming forth on behalf of David Alvarez. And I have never been a fan of either one of them. I think that David Alvarez was a failure in the sense that he didn't really respect our community, even though there was a lot of the African-American community reaching over into District 8 that he represented. And I felt that we gave Georgette Gomez a chance, and many of us reached out to her, and you never heard from her again until she decided to run for Congress. So we keep getting these situations of poor choices, and part of it is that people who really have the ability and skills are saying, why should I torture myself and run for office, which is not appreciated, to help people who don't care to appreciate what I'm doing? Why should I do that? And so this is a real issue that we need to think about.
Yeah, and I think that so many people are dismayed with the whole election process and looking for something different. And I think that's what we're going to be looking for as we look at some of the candidate forums. Now, someone asked, are we going to do a debate between those two?
We're not going to do a debate. I mean, hopefully the people that, when you say that area, it's going to be really the South Bay, Chula Vista. Those are the people that are getting the notice in the mail from the Register of Voters and everything, and but no, we're not going to do a debate. I think what we need to do is look very closely at the city council here in San Diego, be conscious of who's running, and who are we going to support outside of our own districts, because it's not just about our district, it's about people down there having a majority vote making decisions that affect all of us.
Yeah, and I think that we no longer can just be, just focused on our area, but we have to look at not only the local elections, but the regional elections, the state elections, and then the nation election, because these midterm elections are not just your local, but it is national also.
Well, Dr. Thompson, this is part of what you and I have committed to doing this year. We're bringing in, we intend to bring in all the members of the city council, all the members of the board of supervisors in San Diego, but we realize that we reach beyond San Diego. They got some real political issues in Lemon Grove. They got some real issues in Chula Vista, where Salas is termed out. They got some real issues in El Cajon in terms of the police department and La Mesa. And so all of these places are part of us. And, when we move north, because we're not restricted to down here with our outreach, both with terms of the program and the paper, you got the sheriff's department up north many times just going berserk in terms of what they do. We know that Gore just retired, but in the midst of his stepping down, we get the audit report on the in-custody deaths here and the extent to which nothing is really being done about all of this. And so we have some real issues that we need to look at. Here we're dealing with the Commission on Police Practices getting ready to come into effect. We need to eliminate the Citizen Review Board, which is meaningless and a paper tower, tiger doing nothing. And we need to make sure that we get people on the boards and commissions, especially, say, on the county grand jury, which has always looked like a bunch of old white guys because they are retired and can afford to serve. And in San Diego County, there are no stipends for service to encourage the community. So I think we need to look at, do we put stipends in some places? They had to do that with the school board and with the community college district board. Those people get stipends for service. They didn't always get them. When I was first elected to the Board of Education in D.C., we got a stipend of $100 a month, and 2 or 3 board members had to share one secretary, didn't have an office. You had to pull up a chair to a desk. And coming from Capitol Hill, that was totally unacceptable to me. Because every time the school district got sued, my name was the one on the lawsuit.
Wow.
And it wasn't the secretary or the clerical people. And so I revolutionized that place in terms of suggestions. When I left, members had a salary that was part of the salary that members of the city council got, which meant that parents and citizens could afford to take a leave from a job and get involved hands-on. Because a school board is really for one purpose, and people miss this, and this goes back to the Horace Mann making this observation, because he was the Secretary of Education at one point, I believe, in Massachusetts. And the school board is for the purpose of ensuring that a community's values and mores are inculcated into the teaching which the professional educators bring. So a school board was never meant to be a depository of education professionals arguing with other professionals on the administration side. It was intended to be a place where mom and daddy and John Q. Citizen could get involved in what was happening and help set policy to ensure that Johnny and Leroy and Tay-Tay and Shay-Shay had a balanced education and not just a setup. And so because parents don't know this, because we don't teach civics anymore in our schools, and so that I sometimes chide myself for doing this, but I am sad to say that most of the people who hold their hand up here to become citizens of the United States, when we have these naturalization ceremonies, and they are entitled to that under the 14th Amendment, those people know more about this government than the people who were born and raised here. And if you go to at least it used to be, if you went to the Spanish-speaking TV channels, they had citizenship kits that gave you the Constitution, the Declaration, and the amendments, and how all these things were supposed to work, and who's elected in the House and the Senate, and all. Most of our people don't know that. They have no idea. So we need to back off a little bit, get educated, and get involved, because there's a plan to move us out the picture.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's go to national news. Let's talk about the war. The war is got people shook.
Well, it should have people shook in terms of what's taking place. And
Now,
one of the
I'm gonna
reasons,
interrupt you because I want you to talk about it, but I also want you to put the biblical twist on it on God Radio since we're here.
well, what is happening in large part is Putin is acting out biblical prophecy, and he doesn't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
When the Soviet Union broke up, there were 14 different countries that were involved. That's
Mm-hmm.
why it was the United Socialist Soviet Republic.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Putin wants to do is take them back one at a time. There's still 11 of them out there, if you count Ukraine, that he would like to pull back. And he can't pull all of these people back because once folks have tasted freedom, they don't want to go back. That's number one. The other thing that is at work here is, though, Putin sees himself as the architect of reuniting Russia and making it a power source.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a strange scenario because if you read in the book of Ezekiel and Bible prophecy, and you get into Gog and Magog, and you get into what's going to lead to the final battle of Armageddon, when Russia and Iran and China and all of those people will come against Israel, which people laugh at and say, oh, y'all don't know what you're talking about. But it will happen, folks. And the place where the battle is going to occur, if my geography serves me right now, part of the Euphrates River flows, and that's going to dry up and open the space. Well, Putin wants this grandeur that he wants to rebuild, and it's not going to happen. The biggest problem we have right now in this war, in addition, I make two observations. The tragedy that people are dying, number one. I observed that 2 million people have been able to flee, and they've been welcomed in the neighboring countries because all of those people have family and relationships in terms of Russia and what was there, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But here's another thing, the people that you see on television fleeing are white. They're
Mm-hmm.
Caucasian. They're European. I know nobody wants me to mention the race card, but I have to mention the race card to make a point because the race was put into the picture when the Ukrainians decided to block the African students who were there in that country from getting on the bus to exit with other people. And not just because they were African, they were women just like the Ukraine women were. And they were pushed off and pushed out until the national news picked up on it. And then their embassies began to raise questions and bring issues to it.
Yeah.
That made a difference. But when I look at what's happening in the Ukraine, I'm so glad that the world is responding to be of help, and my heart is heavy with what I see. But at the same time, I think back to a few years ago when we had the people of color fleeing, okay, from those
Mm-hmm.
countries over there, and they were flooding the refugee camps,
Mm-hmm.
and the same level of supplies and service weren't there. People were dying at sea because, well, I'm not going to blame all of the Coast Guards and people. They couldn't take all the folks in. But this is not a new occurrence in terms of what we have happening. Now, Putin is the problem because this man has already said, in effect, that he will use nuclear weapons if other countries get involved in this.
Yeah.
And so right now, the president of Ukraine is pushing for a no-fly zone. NATO, Biden, everybody is saying, no, we're not going to do that, because if they get into a no-fly and they shoot down a Russian plane, we will be in World War III.
Yeah.
Now, Poland just tried a real slick move, wanting to give some MiG jets to the Ukraine and send them to an American air base. America was smart enough to say, no, we're not going to do that. The other problem, though, and this is where the president is trying to make sure that he makes peace as he moves, is because the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, has an Article 5 in it. And Article 5 is the hot button article because Article 5 says that an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. Mm-hmm. The Ukraine is not in NATO. Putin was insisting on getting a commitment from NATO that it wouldn't give membership to Ukraine as a conditional bluff that he wouldn't go forward.
Yeah.
Well, now that Ukraine is in a battle with Russia under the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's charter, they can't be admitted anyhow because you can't admit a country to NATO who is involved in an armed conflict.
Yeah.
And so we over here, I'm hearing people say we're willing to suffer at the pump. Yes, because when you see people losing their lives, their homes, and everything they have, like really, what is a few dollars if you can still put gas in a car?
Yeah.
But that is only part of our problem. The other part of our problem, and the president has created a task force to deal with it, is greed. And we saw it here in disaster that people will jack up prices when supply and demand gets to be an issue because of a disaster or tragedy, and they try to milk it for all that they can get. And so that's one of the issues that we have going on here. We don't know how many of these people are going to end up trying to get here. We know that food and supplies are being shipped, collected in San Diego, sent to L.A., transported by L.A. to Germany and other countries, and loaded onto other planes and flown in to help the Ukraine people. I think Ukraine is doing a phenomenal job of defending itself. America has given all kinds of military aid in terms of things. I like what the president of Ukraine said when he made the statement. They said, we'll give you a ride out of the country. He said, I don't need a ride. I need ammunition.
Yeah.
And so he's not going to leave. And I think we should look very closely because, you see, if Putin is successful with Ukraine, Poland knows that they and some other countries are next because this is that march to get those 11 countries back. This is that march. And just for the record, folks, Putin is not the Antichrist. The Antichrist will come out of the Mediterranean area. He will not come out of Russia.
Yeah.
Okay? And so we want to get that out of the way and just deal with the rest of this in terms of how we can help and rescue and save lives to the extent that we can.
You know, one of the things that in this season, I think that is important that we are supportive. We actually in one of the schools that I serve actually had a Russian program, and where kids that were in the school would learn Russian, and we would have a Russian sister school many years ago. And they would come and stay here for 2 or 3 weeks, and then our students would go over there. Now those kids that came here to the United States that said they would love to come back, now they are in the Army. And one of the kids just recently sent a message to our principal that said, we didn't know that this was really a war. They told us this was an exercise.
Well, this is unfortunate because America has been so open. General Slavsky, I can't remember his name properly. He was a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I believe he was Russian by birth and a U.S. citizen. So those things are not, surprising. But, Russia has been a very interesting country. I remember back in the mid-1960s when we were under Johnson debating the Great Society, there was an effort to get the kind of child care programs that we're talking about now on the books in the 1960s, okay, in the late 1960s. And Russia was one of the countries that offered total child care. And people in Congress resisted it because it was a socialist country, and they thought that state support of child care was a socialist activity based on what was going on in Russia. And it wasn't that kind of thing. And so we have some real issues here, but we also are seeing something else at work. We're seeing companies pulling out right and left. American Express, Visa, MasterCard, all these people are gone. Nike, everyone's pulling. And my concern is at what point is Putin going to get so frustrated with the isolation? Right now, there are 5,500 and some sanctions against Russia in total on a global scale. And the country that's number 2 behind them with that is Iran, that has like 3,700 and some sanctions, okay? And so it's a danger here because if Putin hits one of those countries or if he pushes the button and decides to go nuclear, the world as we know it, all of us is over. There'll be a remnant, there'll be some people left, but life will no longer ever be what we know. If you want to get a glimpse of life, go look at the book of Eli, with Denzel Washington, because that's about where we will be. And I heard one retired general last week make the statement, it doesn't help the rest of us, but he made the observation. He said, if Russia uh, uh, goes nuclear, we will vaporize that society. Well, the vaporizing the Russian society is not going to bring back the rest of the world
Hmm.
that is going to be caught up, but not yet destroyed. Remember, because Bible prophecy is heavy, and it's very interesting the number of people that are teaching on it right now. Uh, from Jeffries at First Baptist Dallas to
Hmm.
David Jeremiah and Daniel, and when you take Daniel and Ezekiel, and you look especially in Daniel at the giant that he saw, the
Hmm.
toes and the kingdoms, and we see the European Common Market, now 25 countries in terms of what it's doing, which represents the Rome, which is the fourth empire from the biblical stand that's coming back together, the creation of the euro dollar, and the removal of other countries' currency to make that dollar work. All of these things, the idea that right now, what is it? There are four companies controlling food supply
Hmm.
here in this country, and so we have to move through these mazes to get to this one world government concept.
Hmm.
And I'm just encouraging us not to just be so happy that we're just floating along, but start giving some thought to where we are, who you are, what's going on, and how we're going to live and work and help each other through what are going to be some very difficult times coming.
Yeah, I think that more than anything else, this is a time for not only self reflection, but spiritual reflection where you ask yourself, where do you stand? Where are you at? And really, there's so many things that are happening in our society that sometimes we just have to say, is this relevant to where we're at right now? A lot of times we waste a lot of time on non-relevant things that I tell people that they don't have a heaven or hell to put us in. You know what I'm saying?
Right. But you keep raising an important point, Dr. Thompson, because this is a time of great stress and depression and isolation. And of all the stuff that you hear very little mentioning of God or spirituality. I'm not saying religion, okay? Because we know that religion is man things, but relationship is God's thing. And
Amen.
so we've got this isolation that's growing. Church
Hmm.
attendance is down by more than 50%,
Hmm.
according to all the studies. And people, even as they're opening up again with the easing of restrictions, people are not going back to church as they were,
Yeah.
and they're not supporting the churches the same way they were. Okay, and so, but yet we're still in crisis mode,
And
and so that's an issue.
and we can't get so comfortable that we lose the savior or the salt, because we're yet still the salt of this earth. And if we lose our savior, then how will the earth be salted, if you will?
Well, you have to explain that to people, Dr. Thompson, because you mean, some people don't realize what happens to salt when it loses its taste,
Hmm.
and that's the savor you're talking about. If the salt loses its seasoning power, Jesus said, "You're the salt of the earth," but if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith is it in good but to be
Hmm.
cast out and trodden under the foot of men? And
Exactly.
so, if and we're going to be the light of the world, then if we're going to be a light, we're not supposed to be a pin light,
Hmm.
and we're not supposed to be a match. Okay,
Exactly.
if we're going to be the light, we need to be a light.
Yeah.
And when the teaching on the mount was taking place, and he said, men don't light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick,
Hmm.
and it gives light to all that is in the house. That's because of the way the house was met.
Hmm.
The houses didn't have windows like we have now, and
Exactly.
that was the light that made the difference. So
Exactly.
we need to get back into the Word. We need to get back to our relationship with the Father. We need to get back to our relationship with each other.
Amen.
We're seeing that this evening we have a clips of road rage going on. We have more deaths by cars. We got crime is up across
Hmm.
the board, and all of these are signs that that are evident in a society when it has lost its godliness
Hmm.
and it has lost its sense of direction.
Yeah, and one of the things about it is that it's time for true leadership to stand. and be visible. And we need to be able to really say this is a season that the true leaders will stand, the true saints of God will stand. And if you won't stand, then move out the way and let people guide you through. Now, before we leave, I would love for you just to give a sneak preview of because this is Women History Month, and there's so many women. I'm gonna shout out several women that I like personally. I'm gonna shout out my wife, Evangel. One of the first gospel program directors in the city of San Diego, but also my little sis,
Yeah.
Miss Chida Darby Warren, working down there with the mayor on cabinet. I'm really excited about that, but also some of our ancestors that went before us that are no longer with us, like Dr. Smith, Dorothy Smith, and so many others.
Well, there have been quite a few, and I would give a shout out to my wife, Dolores Van Rensselaer Warren, the founder of the Huntoon Van Rensselaer Underground Railroad, Monument Foundation in Patterson. Also is responsible for there being a rose garden in Watts that's on the same register with the White House Rose Garden. And she is a writer and a researcher and has done a lot. When Katrina hit, she was one of those people that went to New Orleans and lived in a gym and slept on the ground for 30 days to be of help, and with the Red Cross to be of service to people. But we also have some great people. Of the Voice and Viewpoint in the next week or so is going to be publishing a special section, and is involved and divided into two things. One is going to be in terms of the black women who were first to do things, like the first black woman to graduate from Howard School of Law, and the first black woman in 1880s to get a license to practice medicine in this country. But we also, as we deal with the Russian thing, let us not forget Condoleezza Rice, who was our first black female Secretary of State. But she was more than just a Secretary of State. The thing I loved about, and she was just talking about this recently, how she met with Putin many times. And when she met with Putin, she didn't need an interpreter because she was, as far as I know, the first Secretary of State that we had, and she was a woman who spoke fluent Russian and could talk to him herself.
Yeah.
And so she grew up with those Birmingham 9, those little girls, the four that were killed. They were her classmates and friends that died in that. And so we're highlighting people. We have Dr. Weber, our first black Secretary of State for California. But in Pennsylvania, we had C. Dolores Tucker as the first woman black Secretary of State. We might have Shirley Chisholm as our first black Congresswoman, but we got Kamala Harris as our first Vice President. So we got a lot of people, and I don't want to forget people like Dr. Mae Jameson, who not only was she the first black woman in space, but she was both a physician and an engineer, and a chemical engineer. So we had we're just going to be highlighting these people, and we're going to encourage you to get this thing. I know Mr. Stump's talking about his wife, who was the first black clerk of the port, and Thelma Bowen was a first black airport executive here in San Diego. And it was interesting because the San Diego airport is only about 400 acres. When they hired her, it was just the San Diego airport. After she got here, the state consolidated all of the airports under an authority. So she was over San Diego, Palomar, and all of these other smaller, Montgomery Field, Brown, and all of these. But the irony is that she came from Dallas-Fort Worth, and the Dallas-Fort Worth airport is 2,600 acres. So coming over here to do this little parking lot wasn't a real challenge. So we're going to highlight all of these sisters in terms of things they've done.
And I hope that you have Madam C.J. Walker, because I believe
yeah.
she had the hot comb, and we appreciate
Sure we got Madam Walker, our first millionaire.
Yeah, she
and
is.
Here in San Diego, we also have Myrtle Cole, our first black female city council member.
Yeah.
We got people like London Breeze, who's the first black mayor of San Francisco. And so we're not forgetting any of them. We got the sister that just got elected as the first mayor of St. Louis, Missouri. And so we got black women that are mayors now like in D.C. and formerly Keys Lance Bottom in Atlanta,
Yeah,
but they're not the first. They're
yeah.
continuing, but we're highlighting the first now. And it was black women who were leading their own movement in the for suffrage at the same time that the world was trying to make it look like it was Susan B. Anthony that did everything.
Hmm.
And we're not going to forget the Maya Angelou's, who is going on currency, or
Hmm.
Harriet Tubman's, and all of these people that we stand on their shoulders in terms of the things that they've done. Dorothy Heights, Mary McLeod Bethune, who's
Hmm.
left her legacy with the National Council of Negro Women and the Bethune-Cookman College in Florida. And so everywhere we turn, there are black women doing things.
Well, I do want to say this as we close out. You are doing an outstanding job creating newsworthy historical keepsakes. You know, it's not just newspapers every week, but you're producing things from the Black History presentation down to the women's history presentation that are literally keepsakes that people want to have and keep for generations to come. So kudos to the Voice and Viewpoint. And Dr. Warren, we are out of time.
Yes, we are, and it's been fun, and you just made me do all this talking.
Well, sir, always good to be with you on a Wednesday night. This is from the